We're beginning today chapter 50 in Tanya. It's on page Ayin, which is opposite page 138. Now, from chapter 43 through chapter 49, the author, Rabbi Chaim Dalfin, the Alter Rebbe, discussed different types of Avas Hashem, love for God, that will enhance a person's Torah study and their mitzvahs, so that they shouldn't be boring, not stimulated. In chapter 40, the Alter Rebbe brought the parable that's brought in the Zohar, in the Holy Zohar, that it says a mitzvah and Torah study that doesn't have vitality and energy is like a bird who's missing its wings. Every bird that's a healthy bird has two wings. One is the wing of love and one is the wing of awe. And those wings make the bird soar on high. So when we learn and when we daven, when we pray, of course you could learn and pray and it's meaningless and it's without heart and soul. So is it better to pray than not to pray? Is it better to pray without intent and inspiration than not to pray? No. But nevertheless, it's not going too far. It's not soaring on high. So these chapters from 43 through 50, through 49, the Alter Rebbe gave us different methods of meditation and reflection and contemplation, how to inspire our study of Torah and mitzvah so they should soar on high. That was the basic message. Now in chapter 50, it comes along with another type of love for God, but one that rather than remaining here on earth and praying and studying and bringing kind of God into your prayer, into your Torah study, the objective of the love of chapter 50 is to leave your bodily state, spiritually speaking. We don't mean to kill yourself, but to have an experience which is called in the writings klois hanefesh, cessation of the soul, meaning that you pray so much with such fervor and you learn with such intensity that all you're interested is in being with God, and you want to forget about where you are and who you are and everything else. And it's at that very moment when you come to the peak experience of cessation of soul, klois hanefesh, that it touches the essence of God. And what's the essence of God? Remain on earth and serve God here. But in order to come to that position, that what God ultimately wants of a human being is to be here, you need to first have the inspiration that you don't want to be here. You hear that? In other words, until now, the at the end of the day, the I and what I represent and who I am and everything else was very important. And it basically meant that the ego at the end of the day is important. Here in this chapter, the Alter Rebbe says, I'm going to share with you, he says, an approach to Hashem that you lose yourself, you reject yourself. And it's in this rejection and in this loss that you find yourself, because God wants you to be here. So then your being here is not because you have a self-interest and self-ego at any level, but it's because of Hashem. And this is called, in the terminology of the Alter Rebbe, the love, the gold love versus silver love. It's a virtue of gold over silver. And let's learn inside and I'll explain. Vihine, chapter 50. Perik Nun. Kol Pchinas U'Madregas Ava Hanal, all the different levels of love that we mentioned from chapters 43 through 49, Hey Mesitri the Yemina, they come from the right side. There's the right, there's the middle, and there's the left. Chesed is to the right. Gvura, justice, severity, discipline is to the left orientation. Rachamim, balance, the balance is the middle. So when we talk about love for Hashem, until now we were focusing on the right orientation. The Alter Rebbe also says this is also called Upchinas Kohen Ish Chesed. Turn to the top of 140. It's the Kohen who is a Ish Chesed. We have a Kohen in Yiddishkeit, right? The priest, the Kohen, and we have a Levite, a Levi. It's explained in the Sforim, and he's going to talk about it here as well, that Kohen is Chesed and a Levi is Gvura. Why is a Levi Gvura? Because a Levi sings. The job of the Levi and the Levites in the Holy Temple in the Beis HaMikdash was to sing to God. Singing comes from you feeling deeply something, and you're passionate, and that same movement and orientation is Gevura. What's right is right, what's wrong is wrong, right? It's a disciplined approach. Chesed is like water, soft, it's kind, it's easy, it comes from heaven to you. So Chesed, the Kohen, is called Ish HaChesed. V'nikra Kesef HaKadoshim. And the orientation and desire that the Kohen brings along in his service to God is known as the silver, the money of the holy money, but the holy Kesef. Miloshon. That word Kesef comes from another Hebrew word, nichsaif. Nichsafto, we desire, there was a desire, a very strong desire, lebeis avicha, to be in the Father's home. So, kesef, money, right? Normal people want money. They have a strong desire for money. Because kesef, the Hebrew word for money itself, implies strong desire, passion, ava, love. Kohen ish chesed. A Kohen ish chesed who, through their love for God, desired God. Ach yeshay pchilas avo, says the Alter Rebbe, this is everything that we've learned until now. But here he says there's another level of love for God. And look at the words now. Ha'oile al kulano. This is a love for God that's greater than anything we've learned until now. Kemailis, it's analogous to the virtue of hazov, of gold over al hakesef. Now, why is gold more valuable than kesef? And how much gold is more valuable than kesef? So, it's not just, I need a lot of gold to equal silver. No. Even an iota of zav is so much valuable. I mean, you could take the worth of gold on the market and the worth of silver. There's no comparison. An ounce of gold versus so much more of silver. Why? Because it's in the quality of the gold. It's the quality that makes the difference between gold and silver. Says the Alter Rebbe here that the virtue of this love that we're about to discuss and discover is analogous to the virtue of zav, of gold over silver. Vihi. Now tell me what it is, and he tells you. Vihi, and it is ava kiddush beyesh. It's a love of a burning flame of fire, mepchinas gvuris elyonis, the bina, which comes from what's called the supernal severity of bina ilah, of supernal bina. in simple English, because it sounds very Kabbalistic. We all have Chokhmah and Bina. We have three components to the brain: wisdom, comprehension, and concentration, all faculties of the brain. What's the tendency of Chokhmah? The Alter Rebbe taught us earlier in Tanya: creativity. Creativity requires calmness, right? To create an idea, you have to sit back and think quietly. The commotion that comes along with an emotional state is a contradiction to creativity, generally speaking. It doesn't help creativity. It blocks creativity. Creativity requires a lot of calmness, a lot of thought. So what he says here is that this love that's passionate, Kiddush Be'esh, it doesn't come from Chokhmah, it comes from the element in the brain that's known as Bina. So what we're learning here is another point, Avram, and this is important. Not only is there a difference in the type of love in the heart, is my love a fiery love or a calm love? Not just that, but the love begins in the brain, right? Because the love in the heart, right? The midah in the heart, the emotion of the heart, is triggered by the brain. When you understand something, you have a feeling of love, a feeling of awe. So if we say one type of love is fiery and the other type of love is calm, its beginning begins in the brain. And that's what he says, that yes, it does begin in the brain. That the love of fire, its source in the brain is Bina, and the love of Kesef, of the Kohen, is in Chokhmah. And that's why the love coming from Chokhmah is more of a calm love, a thoughtful love, a meditative love. Whereas the love of Rishpei Eish, like a burning fire with lots of passion, that comes from Bina, which is associated with Gevura. So friction, intense friction. There's the friction of the heart, and then there's the friction in the brain. And that's what comprehension is. What does it mean, Moshe? To comprehend something means to argue it out, to analyze it. That's a state of friction and tension, right? In Chokhmah, where it's calm and restful, you're not fighting. But in Bina, you start taking this idea and start comparing it. Is it like this? Or is it like that? In other words, the analysis process, the analytical process, is itself a notion of tension and friction in the brain. And the result is that when an emotion comes from that part of the brain, it's a fiery emotion. It's very, very passionate. It's very intense. Whereas an emotion that comes from you could call it the right side of the brain versus the left side, Chokhmah, it's a calm emotion. And we find this by people. There are people who their emotions are more on the calm side, and there are people whose emotions are very fiery, right? Go just go into any shul, or go into any communal setting. Shabbos, I was talking about the Rebbe's brother-in-law's yahrzeit, which was last Thursday, Reb Shmaryo Garari. He was called the Rashad. And I was sharing history, much of which the people don't know, and there was total silence, and the people were listening, and I went on quite a bit. Maybe I should have not, but everyone was awake and focused. And then one fellow whose son made the kiddush because he had a baby girl, he says to me, "Could you say a Dvar Torah?" And I said to him, "Relax, just relax." Now, I think he objected because one of the things that I said was a little controversial, or could be perceived that way, And he probably felt that certain people there are newcomers, so they don't need to hear that. I'm telling you what I think. But in thinking about it, and then I went on and I finished. It was, but in thinking about it, that person is more of the fiery type. So whatever he hears, his approach to it is fiery. Is like, it's not calm. It's not calm. That's people tend to either be calm people or fiery people. I mean, a charismatic person is someone who has a good balance between the fire and the calmness. But most people are either in this category or that category. It's just a matter of revealing it. When is the fire going to come out? When is the passion going to come out? And other people, they're just not moved. You can, the world can be coming to an end, God forbid, or this disaster or this great thing, and they're just their own merry self. They're just no change. Oh, really? Oh, really? Wow, that's interesting. That attitude without any fire, because that's their orientation, and it's acceptable. They're chokhmah. They're chesed. The others come from gvura, from bina. That's what the Alter Rebbe is saying here. The love that we're talking about over here, in this chapter, that the Alter Rebbe says, it's ola al kulon, it's greater than all, is a love that is fiery. And he's going to explain more why this is. So let's continue. And he says, we're on the fourth line on page 140, towards the end. He comes to this fire through contemplation, b'gdula seisav baruch hu, when he thinks about God's greatness. The kule kamei kilochot mamish choshiv, all is naught, as though it doesn't exist at all. And when he realizes that everything that's before him in the world is like nada, zero, without God, is tislayet, v'tislayev hanefesh, this person's soul will burn in passion and in intensity, liyakar teferes gedulosoi, to have the preciousness, the dearness of God's greatness, ulistakola biyakara de malka, and the person will gaze. Listakola means to gaze at biyakara, from the word yakar, the dearness, the preciousness of the king, the malka, which is melech. Kirish beyeish, like with a burning coal, shalhevis aza, a powerful flame, ha'oila lemaila, that ascends upward. Vilipored, and desires to separate itself mehapsila, from the wick that keeps it below the fire, and it v'ho'etzim, or the wood, shenechezes behen, that the fire is attached to the wood that keeps the fire here. This means the severity, which its element is fire, eliki, godly fire, shebenefesh elikis, that's within the godly soul. When a Jew has this intensity, the person comes to a thirst. The person is thirsty, very thirsty, spiritually speaking. As King David says in Psalms, the King David says when he was in Midbar Yehuda, the Judean desert, near where you guys live over there, not too far, right? And David was kicked out. And before he returned, he says, God, I'm thirsty for you. I'm in the Judean desert. It's beautiful. I remember when, I think Avi took us to Shiloh. Isn't that in Yehuda? Am I right, Chevra? No? Yeah, whatever. Anyway, wherever it was very beautiful. And you can even see far away, but it's not the Temple Mount. It's not Jerusalem. So David HaMelech says, I want to return to Ir David, the city of David. So he says in Psalm 64, I believe, 63, 64, I think. Tzama lecho nafshi. My soul is thirsty for you. I have a strong passion and desire for you, God. I want to be there in Jerusalem. And after having a thirst, he becomes what we call like lovesick. He reaches a place of cholas ava. He's so in love with God, and yet he doesn't have God because he's sitting in the Judean mountains, and he's not in Jerusalem, that he becomes sick. Have you ever seen someone who becomes sick from missing God? I saw someone who became sick after the Rebbe became ill in 1992. He locked himself in the room, he didn't come out, and ultimately he passed away. And they had to bring him out. He just couldn't face that reality. Now, I'm not talking about a newcomer, I'm talking about someone who was a seasoned Chabadnik. But he just went into a depression. So here we're not talking about a depression. Here we're talking about a positive. Now, depression is negative, as we learned in Tanya chapter 26. Here we're talking about someone who has such a love for God that he becomes sick. I must have it. I don't have it. So again.
Lovesick.
What?
Lovesick.
That's what I said.
Lovesick.
I said that. Yes, thank you. I said that earlier. Anyway, so we have number one, a thirst for Hashem. Tzima'an Moshe. Tzama lecha. I'm thirsty. Then he becomes cholas ava. Moshe Drucker, he becomes what? He becomes lovesick for God. And then there's a third feeling. He can't take it anymore. He can't be without Hashem. He sees it. His soul is extinguished. Cessation of the soul. In Hebrew, klot hanefesh, klois hanefesh. Now, right, you're thinking, what does klois hanefesh means? He dies. No. Doesn't die. If you die, you die. Dying is negative. All these things of tzama and of cholas ava and the third stage, chayib zev, of klois hanefesh are all positive. It's a proactive, positive passion, intention for God. I love you, God, so much I must have you. I can't be without you. And ultimately, I cease to appreciate the physical and material, and all I want is to be with you. Right? The story I told you once. Just to repeat it. Rabbi Mendel Futterfas, this great chassid, right? Growing up in Kharkov, in Ukraine, in Russia, he had friends. They survived Stalin. They come to Eretz Yisrael. He's a teacher on Mashpia in the Chabad Yeshiva there. It's been years that he's seen his friend Ari Yosef Belinitsky. He sees someone in the base medrash. He sees someone in the study hall, and he goes over to me, he says, listen, I'm giving you money. Get on a plane, go to France, where my childhood friend, teenhood friend, Aaron Yosef lives, and give him a hug. That's all I want you to do, and then you could come back. He didn't tell him to sit and drink whiskey with him. He didn't tell him to fabring with him. He didn't tell him to learn with him. Just give him a hug from Mendel Futterfas that I love him and he's very important to me. And you can return. Klois HaNefesh doesn't mean you end your life. Klois nefesh means you have such a feeling where the everything else in your life is not important anymore. What's important is the attachment to God. In this case, for Futtafas, it was to give his friend a hug, but he's too old. He can't travel. So he sends someone younger to give his friend a hug. Again, was that, was it only that he was a thirst for his friend, or lovesick for his friend, or Klois nefesh? I can't tell you. I don't know. But regardless, each of those can be an expression that's experienced through that type of behavior. And I'm using that as an example.
Rabbi, we I think all of us here,
yes,
so we know what that feeling is, because we always have that longing. We miss somebody, a father, a mother, a grandma who's in Chutz La'aretz, or we can't, So we say to somebody, if you see him in shul, give him a hug for me. I say it all.
Okay, good. Okay. But remember, what we're talking about here, Yoni, is to the point where you're willing to give away. The feeling is, I'll give up everything for Hashem. I mean, or if for another Jew. In other words, it's not just, a relative. It's this feeling that the material world, the Gashmis world, doesn't do it for me anymore. How many cars can I own? How much money can I have? How many? It doesn't do it anymore. I'm thinking, and trust me, I'm a regular guy. I'm thinking, Thursday is my 40th anniversary, so I'm thinking, where am I going to go? And I say, well, you're so close. You're in Brooklyn. You can go across the bridge to Manhattan. I don't have any desire to go to Manhattan. There was a point that once a year I would take my wife out and we'd go to a nice restaurant, a kosher restaurant in Manhattan. I don't know. I just don't have that feeling. I'll do it if it's the right thing to do, and but it doesn't talk to me anymore. I'm not 40. I'm older. I've done that already. In other words, a person, the more they learn, the more they daven, the more they want to connect to God. It's like my wife always says, I say, maybe we should go, let's go. She's from Australia. Let's go this summer. Let's go to Australia for 2 weeks. Your grandparents are buried there. You grew up there. I'll treat you to. She says, if I want to go, okay, maybe. She says, if I don't want to go anywhere, it's Eretz Yisrael. That's something meaningful. Of course, we have a daughter, we have a son-in-law and grandchildren, but that's the point. Eretz Yisrael, Israel, Eretz Yisrael, the Holy Land. Just walking on the cobblestones, like I've told you of Yerushalayim, makes me tear up. Makes me wow. What a privilege I'm able to walk in the land of Eretz Yisrael. So what I'm saying is that the Klois nefesh, I'm just sharing out loud, the Klois nefesh that he speaks about here doesn't mean Moshe cessation, kill yourself, lock yourself up and don't come out. No, you have to come out. Come out and put a pair of tefillin on with another Jew who didn't put on tefillin today. Go visit someone in a nursing home. Make someone feel good. Hi, how are you? What's going on? Make him laugh. And if that becomes your modus operandi, then that's Klois nefesh. You might feel crummy inside. Maybe you're upset about something today. But you are able to detach yourself from your own personal struggles and do something for someone else. That's the ultimate. That's a great thing, to be able to detach ourselves from things that are upsetting us and morbid and angry and upsetting and on and on and on and on. And some of it's right, But at the end of the day, why should the poor man suffer? Why should the person who needs a smile not get the smile from you, Why? Because you woke up on the wrong side or someone hurt you? Yeah, it's an issue. But right now, bring it to the other person. So all I'm saying is that when we learn here in Tanya that this love of the thirst for God, the love sickness for God, and the Klais HaNefesh, it's intense feelings for Hashem that should be proactive. In other words, it's in this proactive feeling for God that I feel like I just want to be with God, or I'm lovesick for God, or I'm thirsty for God. Okay, Chavre, we'll continue with Hashem tomorrow. And Moshe, have a good day. What?
It's a very special Indian. I've never learned something like this in any of the years of Chassidus. This is beautiful.
Yeah, no, this is a new idea in Chassidus that we haven't really tackled before. Chapter 50 in Tanya. That's why we're learning the Tanya, and we're going through it relatively, slow. And I asked several times my teacher, Rabbi Yoel, what I should teach people over all the years, the 40 years that I'm doing this type of work. And he told me that the Rebbe told him as a young man to teach Tanya. So, you guys, what I'm saying, you're from, you're involved, you're interested. But there were places where I didn't have such students. And to teach Tanya to them was a much more difficult thing, so, but it could be done. It could be done. And not enough is done. And we don't have enough good teachers of Tanya. You need to be able to teach the Tanya in a way that talks to all kinds of people, because there's gold mines. And I think, as you see, you could learn Tanya in various layers. You could learn it from the deepest way to a cursory way, to a psychological way, to a Talmudic way. There are different ways of learning the Tanya. And it's important to know your crowd. Like Moshe had me listen. He sent me what the Rav's son, Rabbi Shapiro's son, was teaching Tanya there. And I heard a few of those classes, and he taught it in a different way, which was good, because he was teaching it to people in the shul who are not Chabadniks or Chabad-oriented and don't have that background. And frankly, he doesn't have that background either, because he's not Chabad. He didn't grow up that way in a Lubavitch yeshiva. But nevertheless, it was I don't know if it's continuing, but it was a very, very good thing. It's a very good thing. And, the Alter Rebbe wrote the Tanya for Klal Yisrael. It's not owned by Lubavitch. It's for all Yidden. So if someone learns it in a certain, non-Chabad way, a Polish way, a Hungarian way, a Belzer way, so be it. As long as they understand that there's a lot more there. It's not just a book of emotions like Mesilas Yesharim. It's a book of Hasidus and Chabad Hasidus. Otherwise, it loses its Bible of Chabad Hasidus. If it's just another sefer like Shem Shmuel or Mesilas Yesharim or Nesiva Shalom, then what's special about it? I mean, they're all good Sfarim. Every sefer is holy. But here there is the element of the Chabad element, and in an orderly way, like I told you over and over, as you see how he builds up. Look, this chapter 50 is towards the end of Tanya. Why? Because until now we weren't ready to hear it. We didn't have all those 49 chapters before to kind of, understand what Torah is and mitzvah is and the person and the struggles and everything. Once you have all that, you're more mature. You're more ready to hear more. Chavra, we'll see everyone tomorrow. Zay Gezund. Shalom. Take care. Bye-bye.